Okay, so we're not even pretending anymore.
What do you mean?
We haven't even read Vengeful yet, but we're already complaining about something.
Not complaining. We're happy today. We're praising the book.
Ah, that's a nice change.
Isn't it just? Okay, we're doing this. Hello, my lovelies. Welcome to my lab. Grab some tea or coffee or something stronger of your choosing and sit down with me. Today we're talking about flashbacks, why they're hard to get right, and how I think Vicious from VE Schwab absolutely freaking nailed it. I have a review of Vicious on this channel if you're curious, but normally you don't absolutely need to watch it to understand this video. So while I would absolutely love you forever if you watched it, I understand if you don't. You know, time is a valuable resource. So, flashbacks. What do I think of them and why do they suck? Honestly, I generally don't like flashbacks that much. They often suck. I don't know. I just find that they so often break the flow of a good story that I'm trying to read, or not so good story that I'm trying to read. But they just break the flow to reveal some often superfluous information that could have just been revealed in a more efficient way, like through dialogue or any other mean that doesn't require to stop me from reading what I'm actually trying to read. Thank you very much. Because when I'm reading a scene and I'm invested in a scene or a specific time period that the story is set in, and you suddenly interrupt my reading with like the grand reveal of an event that you've been teasing as that day or the day it happened, to just artificially show me said event, two things can happen. One, the main story is actually very interesting and I am very invested in it. And then the flashbacks are actually taking me from what I'm trying to read. And I will roll my eyes and say, here's another flashback. And the flashback becomes a chore that I have to get through. Two, the flashbacks are actually more interesting than the main story, and I'm just left wondering why I'm not reading a book about what happened in the past instead of the book I'm currently reading. And in the case of Vicious, I would say we're probably closer to a case 2. The main story is obviously very interesting, but the beginning is just kind of slow and not a lot happens. And the flashbacks are really the main focus of the story, where most of the action-heavy bits happen, and also the emotional weight of the story just kind of starts there. There's a little bit of a shift later in the story when we get kind of caught up on everything that the flashbacks have to reveal, and we're aware of most of the mysteries, at least the key ones. And then the main story in the present time becomes kind of the heavy hitter. And yeah, after that point, we still get flashbacks, and they're still interesting. So why? Why do I usually rip out my own hair when I see that a book that I'm reading has flashbacks, and yet I have enjoyed every single second of reading Vicious? And I think it might be because of the perfect structure of the book, and also the excellent handling of mystery setup. As I've said, the main story starts slow, but it starts strong, with two unrelated characters who met one day ago and walk by night into a cemetery to dig out a corpse. The two looked like ghosts as they wove through the graveyard, both blonde and fair enough to pass for siblings, or perhaps father and daughter. They were neither, but the resemblance certainly came in handy since Victor couldn't very well tell people he'd picked up the girl on the side of a rain-soaked road a few days before. Okay, you have my attention. Truth be told, Victor didn't care for graveyards either. He didn't like dead people, mostly because he had no effect on them. It's a very mysterious introduction, and I find the writing kind of subtle. It just feels like what the characters would say and do, and it's not trying to get too much of your attention on, oh, what could have happened that fateful day? Or anything heavy-handed like that. It's just not too in your face with how mysterious it is. It just feels pretty natural. She had always been on the short side, but it certainly didn't help that she had barely grown an inch since the day she'd died. It's only been 3 pages and I have a million questions. The chapter starts with an indication of time and place. Last night, Merritt Cemetery. So, what do you mean last night? What happens today? Who is Victor and why does he come by night in a cemetery with a girl he doesn't know? Why does the young girl he doesn't know come with him in a cemetery? Why are they digging up a corpse? What effect does Victor have on the living and why doesn't it work on the dead? What do you mean she died? So yes, intriguing. So many questions. And then the next chapter starts with another indication of time and place. 10 years ago, Lockland University. And then we get a slow but very well-paced build-up and reveal to all of the events that happened that led to the two of them there and then in Merritt Cemetery last night. So already I'm just hooked with so many questions that I just don't have the answers to. And the flashbacks, they serve to very slowly respond to those questions while introducing new characters and very intriguing character dynamics. And the past 10 years ago is honestly fascinating. For a while, it's kind of where all of the action happens, so you're never bored of it. And you also know that this is the core that holds most of the answers to the initial questions. Honestly, even though I was never bored of the present either, I just wanted to read mostly the flashbacks at some point while I was reading. So yeah, I think we're definitely more in a case 2 in this book. But then, when we get back to the present days, not only are the scenes relatively short, which is nice because it doesn't keep you too long away from the juicy bits, but cherry on top, every moment in the present just raises even more questions that you will find answers to in the past. Truly is beautiful. So you see a first flashback and you're introduced to Ellie, Victor's university friend, who is described as smiling like a politician. They are at university studying science, medicine-y kind of things, and they have to announce their thesis and the theme that they're going to get with. And Ellie announces that he wants to do his thesis on Extraordinary, an urban legend of people who have started to develop superpowers. Oh, okay, so I guess that's the beginning of an explanation as to why that girl Sydney said she died. Back to present day. Her cheeks burned, and she was sweating through her coat, and she felt alive. As far as she was concerned, that was the only good thing about digging up a corpse. Couldn't we do something else? She asked, leaning on the shovel. She knew Victor's answer, could feel his patience thinning, but she still had to ask because asking was talking, and talking was the only thing distracting her from the fact that she was standing over a body and digging her way toward it instead of away from it. The message has to be sent, said Victor. He didn't stop digging. Huh? Wait, what message? He was too busy trying to picture what Ellie's face would look like when he received their message, trying to picture the shock, the anger, and threaded through it all, the fear. Fear, because it could only mean one thing. Victor was out, Victor was free, and Victor was coming for Ellie, just as he'd promised he would. Wait, what? But they were just friends in the last page I've read! What's going on here? Every time you get an answer from the past and you start thinking you're catching up to things, the present will just throw a new question at you. So you get another flashback, a new answer. Present, Another question. It's magnificent and you're never bored. And at some point you do eventually kind of catch up on most of the questions that you have. And you get answers to most of the mysteries, at least the more pressing ones. And that's when you get the shift, where the present starts becoming the most interesting part and where most of the action starts happening. And you still get flashbacks from then on some of the remaining mysteries that haven't been solved yet, but they're not as juicy as the ones before. They're kind of extra information for all the little tidbits that you were still wondering about, but didn't feel as vital anymore. So they still help shed some light on some of the lighter mysteries that are still around, but they're not as intriguing as the present time anymore. But they still have a purpose. They still explain some of the questions, lighter questions that have been asked earlier. So then when we start shifting from a case 2 to a case 1 flashback, you're still not bored. Because then the flashbacks start becoming shorter, and when they interrupt the juicy bits of the story, like where the action is happening, they are answering questions that you still had. So I wasn't personally puffing air out of my nostrils. I was still genuinely intrigued because then my reaction was, oh, so that's why. So yeah, that's why I think the flashbacks in Vicious are a masterpiece as someone who doesn't usually like flashbacks. So where does that leave us with flashbacks in general? What did we learn? The thing with flashbacks is it's important to ask ourselves if they're necessary. What do they reveal? And could we learn that thing without flashbacks? And would the emotional impact of that discovery be the same without a flashback? Because genuinely, in the case of Vicious, I really don't think it would. And if we end up concluding that we do need a flashback in a story, I think it's really important to try and think of a structure that makes them work. So yeah, I think a book that has flashbacks just needs to have a bit of a structure around those flashbacks. I don't think there's like a set rule on how to incorporate them in a story. Maybe a chapter here or there, or one every 2 chapters, or the beginning of each chapter. I don't think there's necessarily a need to be super rigid about it, but just some sort of order. But more importantly, I think both the past and the present, or however many timelines you have in your book, each needs to have a purpose and know where the interesting bit is and just dedicate the right amount of time to each. I think part of what makes the flashbacks so efficient and well written in Vicious is that the focus is always on the most interesting part. When the flashbacks are the interesting parts, then the flashbacks are longer and take more time, and the present scenes are a bit shorter and mainly used to ask even more questions to make you even more intrigued to read the flashbacks. But when the present becomes the more interesting part, then the present scenes are longer and the flashbacks become shorter. So yeah, it's pretty much all about balance, if you ask me, and about knowing where the focus should be, knowing what is the core and most interesting part of your story. So yeah, it's all about balance, if you ask me, and about knowing where the strength of the story is. But yeah, just let me know your thoughts. Do you usually have a problem with flashbacks, or have you seen other stories where they were done exceptionally well? Just let me know in the comments. I'm super curious. As someone who doesn't like flashbacks generally, I'm kind of intrigued to see other examples where I would like them. Anyway, that's it. Click the like button if you've enjoyed the video and subscribe if you want to see more of my face. Thanks for tuning in and continue to enjoy stories.